So my contribution to the book is a chapter on challenges of digital transformation in the financial sector. I have tried to explain, because there was a limitation, what for most people, most younger people actually ask me, how did we get into this situation that we are in now? So I've tried to explain that in as much detail as I could. So hopefully it will get the point across. The challenges specifically for the financial sector in the banking industry and the insurance industry. Along with that, I've put some case studies in there to show some real life examples of these transformation challenges and why 70 to 80% of these projects fail across the world. Japan is no exception, actually. What am I about to share now is kind of the fun part of of the IT. I thought I can just size out what the challenges we are in terms of more benchmarking numbers. And then what I'll try to do is to relate it back to the seriousness of the issues that we have. I will try to take you down, not 20,000 leagues under the sea, but a few hundred feet to show you where the real issues are. At the top, it's like an example of a duck, swimming in the lake. It looks very calm on the top, but deep down, at the bottom, it's working very hard to make it look smooth. So I will try to explain the issues that we face when we come to these challenging projects. So I'll share my presentation, and please post your questions. Be happy to answer as much as we can in this session. If not, we can always follow up later. So the topic here, and what I shared earlier in February was, we can sit down and make some beautiful strategies. And what are the challenges that you face when it comes to delivering those strategies? And the issues that example projects have faced when they got a bit deep into the execution and the delivery part. So these I will share with you in this presentation. But to start off, this is a fun part. I would like you guys to just think of a number. What you think is, how many lines of code are there in the world today? This is there's no right or wrong answer. So, and there's no sharing, but just for you to think of a number, let your imagination go loose. And sorry, there's another demo. So what I can share with you is 111 billion is a number that I found from some very trusted site. But this is not the number of lines of code that were developed in the world from the beginning. These are the ones that were developed only in 2017. There was a source that pulled these numbers out of an online Git library that said 111 billion lines of code went live. I'm stressing on the word live, not the ones which are in development or testing, in 2017. Now, if you were to break this down to a level where we can understand how quickly this is happening. So in 24 hours, we would have generated 304 million lines of code, and working all the way down to seconds, which would be 3,520 lines of code going live every second around the globe. Now at this point, just for fun, I'm going to share a little demo with you guys Um, I'm going to start a counter. You will see it when it's already started because there's some limitation here. But can you see the counter? Somebody nod? No, sorry. Stop. So, I'm sorry. It's because I wrote it in a strange language. It needs to be manually started first. Okay, this should work. So when it reaches 12 seconds, when it reached, it was about 40,000 lines of code. This is a typical mobile app is about 40,000 lines of code. So every 12 seconds, we are pushing a mobile app into the world. If you want to do some measurements, so I'm gonna not stop this. I'll keep this running, and I'll go back to my presentation, and then we'll come back to this towards the end to see what are the number of line of code that we have developed while we were in this presentation. So if you were to compare, you know, the typical control system of a military drone is 3.5 million, which we can do in a matter of minutes. A Boeing 787 with full avionics is 6 million, and you know, all the way down to Google, which is 2 billion lines of code of every single service that Google has developed. So the purpose of this little number sharing exercise is just to share the sheer number or the size of the challenge that the world is facing today. And I can tell you from full confidence that everything that you put in production today is a legacy in making. Pretty soon down the road, it will become a legacy that will need to be replaced. Now let's move towards the core of this presentation. And before I start, I want to truly show my reservation on using the word digital, because I think it's so loosely used that everything digital has created an impression that there is some magic dust that's going to come and fix everything if you call it digital. You know, even if I name myself Digital Raja, it probably wouldn't even sound that bad because it's, yeah, I think it's possible. Raja can be digital too. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to omit the word digital and just talk about transformation, which is the challenge that we're facing. Now, I did use the word digital in line number 2, but this is just because there was no other choice. Now, when we create the strategy, the key missing components in creating the strategy is the tech-savvy leadership that Will has also mentioned. And these are the quotes that I've taken from uh, digital media. I just didn't have the space to write the reference there. And it says 73% of the executives lack in technical knowledge. And when it comes to employees, most employees are not equipped to handle, the quick changes or the quick mindset, which is one of the key things in successfully implementing transformation projects. And this is number 3 is a pretty interesting one. Either business is engaged at the end when the decisions are made, and in some cases, business makes the decision and informs IT. So there's that, that lack of coordination between the business and the IT when it comes to making these big transformation strategies. And once all of this is done, especially in the financial sector, there's this one big issue, or the elephant, I call it the elephant in the room, that is not taken into consideration, which causes most of these projects to either fail or be very challenging, is that elephant in the room. Now, what is that elephant in the room is the bit I mentioned, that I'm going to take you down a few leagues to identify where challenges start to appear when we come into the transformation part. But a little quick history. I think most of you, of course, know this, but it's just for the sake of this presentation, I want to just take you through the generations of languages that we've had, which has created these monstrous legacy systems that we're facing. Starting from the 3rd generation, which is the age of the COBOL and assembler language and PL1, which then gave way for the 4th generation languages, and then of course the 5th generation, which we are currently adapting, is the the Java and the Python and so on. Now, if you were to take that example of 111 billion lines of code in 2017, this is the analysis that was done, that how many lines of code were developed on the legacy side of things, if you want to call this the COBOL assembler. 3rd generation is the legacy. So almost 1.5 billion line, or 1.4% of the effort that was made in 2017 was to still maintain our old legacy systems. And then 98.6% was to either develop or maintain what we call the next generation or the new generation systems that we have developed. Now, if we were to break this down with our little calculation methods, just for the 1.4%, that means every second, 48 lines of code are developed to maintain these legacy systems. And now I will come to the point why these are still alive, what challenges do they give us, and why are they so difficult to transform into the next generation. So if we were to take, what is in these systems, that the old legacy systems, these are the statistics that 95% of all the ATM swipes that we do today are COBOL driven. 80% of your in-person transaction, which are either to a financial institute or mainly to a financial institute, run through some kind of a COBOL system. Now, every day, if you look at the money that exchanges between the banking system and the stock exchange, it's worked to be over $3 trillion of commerce is still handled through the old COBOL legacy systems. And if you were to take, how many lines of code are dedicated to maintain or run these systems, it's about 220 billion lines of code. Now, these are all trusted numbers. Like I said, the sources are there. I can share that. Oops. This is an interesting one. We're all looking at the Google search numbers, but for every Google search that takes place, COBOL transaction takes place 200 times more than Google search, somewhere in the world. And COBOL still accounts for 70% of the business transactions that take place in the world today. So what I'm trying to establish here is there's a tip of the iceberg, and what's underneath is the purpose is to show that this is where what we see compared to what we don't see. And almost every, it says here it says Fortune 500 banks, but almost every bank and insurance company has a COBOL system that they use. Now, what is in these legacy systems that is still keeping it alive, and how do we still manage to have all these state-of-the-art systems working, is the link that I'm trying to make here on how we are still using these systems, because we have your product setups are all in your legacy. Although we think we do new business on our mobile phone or a tablet, it still ends up being processed in your legacy. Your clients and your products, and I can give you an example of a company that has a GL in their old COBOL system, where it's an insurance company. Even if you buy any materials or pencils or sharpeners, it still goes to that insurance system, into the general ledger, and into the accounting. What I'm trying to show here is what we see today in our next generation languages, is that we've created small applications which are omni-channel ready. You can use your mobile phone or your tablet or any other device or any internet-based service that we've created. And the impression that we get that these are the state-of-the-art system, these are the transformation that we've done, but basically for every one of these satellite systems that we've created, especially in the financial sector, this is where they link back to your old legacy. Now, this is where the challenges are when we need to do a modernization. We end up connecting it to back in the legacy to either an API or a service layer. Now, there was an aspect that I needed to mention in the book about the specificness of challenges when it comes to the Japanese, for the Japanese sector. So what I've tried to highlight is that when we bring a product or a system from another country or another insurance company, or from your head office in another country, we Japanize it. So what we've done in the past is that we've taken a complicated system and made it even more complicated. The red lines, thick lines, shows the cultural changes that we've made to these legacy systems to Japanize the product, which makes it even more harder than if you compare the same system that is in either US or Canada or UK, which adds to the complexity of transformation. Now, if you were to add the elephant in the room and see that the challenges that we have, you can also see the moving target. We have a code base that is continuously growing. We have a code base that we rely on when we create a new system. And besides the moving target, it's the challenge that ends up giving us very less chance of success that we've seen in the past. And one of the questions that came up, and I wanted to mention here, I think came from somebody who said, "Can you give an example of how?" I think came from Jason. So the example I wanted to give is that if we were to create a satellite system, for example, a illustration system, what we end up doing is that we do part of the illustration in our state-of-the-art technology, but we still have to relate it back to or link it back to your legacy for it to work. Now, the reason we cannot eliminate the corresponding component of that from the legacy is that the skill set required to eliminate these systems is reducing. The second biggest factor is that these systems are maintained by the vendors who developed it 15, 20, 30 years ago. And because of the lack of knowledge at the client side and the lack of knowledge at the management level, these vendors just hold on to it, and they would just scare you that it's impossible. So it's better to create a satellite system and link it to the legacy for it to work, or than to take a risk. Those who've taken the risk in the past, I've got several examples. They either failed because the lack of the funding, or the funding has run out, or the time it took to develop or to do the transformation went so far ahead that they thought it was just easier to just shut this project down. The other question there was about, Japanese government wanted to digitize 20 years ago. I can give an example. I don't know the name of the gentleman, but the Minister for IT in Japan, appointed by Abe-san, he's the chairman of the Hanko Association of Japan. Now, if we have a chairman of Hanko Association running the IT ministry, I say no more. Now, there has been some success stories in completely eliminating these legacy systems, but these things comes with a cost. And one of the things, I totally agree with a lot of what Kieran said, and people talk about the agile, but using the words like agile and digital in these legacy transformation is a bit dangerous in my opinion, because you kind of set a precedence that you can do transformation with an agile way. Yes, you can use aspects of agile during the execution, but if you compartmentalize the project in smaller chunks, yes. But I have also heard statements that people have said we do agile transformation. Even companies are using these words, which sets the impression with the senior management that today we start, tomorrow we wake up and transformation is done. No, it's not going to happen. And this is the lack of experience and knowledge from some levels of the management, and also the patience is the key factor. You have to have the patience to understand the length and breadth of these projects. You have to have the patience to communicate this all the way up to senior management, and then get their blessings and wait. It's not that it's not possible. I mean, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia is one of the example I've used, but I put down 749.9 million. That was a number, but actually it's a lot more than that. It's close to $1,100 million they've spent to completely transform their old legacy system into a new platform. So key factors to keep in mind is the methodologies. SDLC is not the correct approach, because you see, SDLC was developed over the years as a methodology to create new projects or to develop new projects. Whereas the life cycle for transformation is totally different. It's a combination of, it's a hybrid of transformation technologies. It's a hybrid of partially SDLC, partially agile. But because we don't know any other methodology, we start with SDLC, which puts us into trouble 6 to 9 months into the project. One of the other mistakes that we make when we develop the strategy is that we combine data migration with application transformation as within one scope. But actually, these are two different projects. They should be treated as separate projects, because the moment you combine them, you've put twice as much as effort that needs on one executive or one project manager. But they both have different life cycle and they both have different approaches. Unfortunately, again, when we put that dependencies on the vendors, especially the ones who own these products or these legacy systems, and you put them in charge of transforming them, then somewhere down the road there will be some resistance. And without going into details, I've seen many projects where blaming starts and lack of cooperation but again, because within your team, within a client side, there are not many experienced people who can handle situations where we make vendors responsible for making those decisions. The other thing, which again, because we are so agile in many ways, that we cut back on documentation. It comes back to bite us, because when you open up a system which was developed 35 years ago and there was no proper documentation kept, most probably the person who developed is either retired or gone somewhere else. So although it may seem like cutting costs nowadays to avoid the documentation, but it does come back in the long run to be more expensive not to. Now, if the parts of the chapter that I've written explain in more details, how we got to this point, what were the choices we had at the turn of the century, why did we not do the transformation when things were becoming cheaper and newer technologies were available. So some interesting history to catch up with, and that will also tell us why we got to this point. Now I will go back to that little counter we started to see what we have achieved. How many Googles we've written in this. Sorry. There we go. So I've been talking for 101,313 seconds, which is about 22 minutes. And we have developed 4.7 4.8 million lines of code have been developed in the world have gone live. Now I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have, but I have one comment that I wanted to make, and I made a note. Working from home was one comment, and I truly believe that in this COVID time, given the complexities that we have, it is even more challenging for projects. If somebody was running this project, or a transformation project during the COVID time, that makes it even more challenging because, one of the key things in clearly executing a project is communication. And unfortunately, we are not all born pure, true communicators. Exceptions are like Will himself, he's a professor. We tend to communicate better when we are face-to-face, through our body language or through a quick meeting, or just go over somebody's desk and clarify. And if you were to do that in an email or a online session, or especially through writing, I think the challenges become more during the period when you have to work from home. So in my opinion, it is great to work from home, but there's got to be a balance where you need to be either present in front of somebody. When you're sitting in front of a screen, talking to people, arrange a long meeting, you may not be able to communicate that effectively as compared to the old traditional way of, working in an office where you can have a quick discussion over the coffee or a water cooler. So I think that makes it a bit more challenging in working from home and still be able to be effective. And the second thing, which is totally irrelevant, and I'm thinking this, the amount of real estate that they've developed in office buildings in Japan, if we were to go back to working from home, somebody somewhere is going to, pull the plug from saying, no, you have to work from the office because you have to rent these buildings out, right? So that's my opinion on that part.
Asha, there isn't a question right now, but let me ask you one kind of from the commercial side on the legacy systems. And I've been there, done that as well, so understand it's a multi-year effort to get rid of those old things, but at the same time, technology has developed so fast. And if you look at the latest generation of core banking systems that get deployed by the digital banks, right, where we have licenses in Hong Kong and Singapore. So Mox has just launched as a digital brand of Standard Chartered. The cost of running a current account for these new platforms is in the 20s of dollars, while the legacy platforms, because they've grown organically over such a long time and all the reasons that you outlined, it's about 10 times as much. And so if you don't get rid of the legacy infrastructure and you're running at a cost base that is 10 times your competition, what does your future look like as a business then?
I can tell you one thing, that these systems are going to be here in definitely, in my lifetime. And the reason for that is because speed and memory has become cheaper. So we can develop an app. So every time, those who are app developers or technical, that every time you click on something here, it runs an API. through the network into the back end. For us to totally eliminate those legacies, to reduce the cost, that is not possible unless you're willing to spend $800-900 million and have the patience, which Australian Bank did actually over 6 years or 7 years it took them. Now,
I was gonna add that there's no glory in these transformations sometimes, I think.
Yes. Now, I'm not sure if the customers of that bank are now, enjoying the reduced cost after eliminating that huge legacy. But if you spend $800 million to reduce a legacy system, you're going to make it somewhere down the road. So,
with the CEO, there's huge risk and no glory. So
yeah,
I think that's part of the challenge as well, especially when, given the time it takes and the length of the CEOs in terms of office.
Right, but having said that, what you can do, and I mean, I can sit and talk about it for hours. And one thing I'm working with some of the colleagues who also joined this this webinar is that you can eliminate or totally eliminate certain aspects of those legacy. But the issue that we've faced in the past is that we have taken the initiative to put something up front outside the legacy, but we never are able to sever the ties completely. So this, we can, if you do ABC in legacy, let's do XYZ in your front end system. Let's keep the ABC here, right? So this is where the either the lack of knowledge or the confidence or the risk-taking part is, no, remove this, put everything here, and eliminate at least this aspect of it. So these are things that can eliminate parts of the legacy system that should be eliminated. One of the key things that these systems offer today is their processing power for processing millions of records overnight, which is the batch that you run, right? So overnight, all the transactions go through the batch system and it churns them up. 5 o'clock in the morning, the system is ready to be operated the next day. But what you can do now, if you design your satellite systems or your next generation systems in a clever way, you can process these records as you collect them. So you take the dependency away from your legacy on doing this process, unless you have specific things, which is at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. the interest rate comes out, right? So then you calculate your stocks or your face value or your insurance based on that time. Yeah, that you have to wait for. But a lot of it, you can do that upfront now. But because we are scared by the vendors who own these systems, because we don't have that knowledge in our own client side, we tend to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, leave it here, but we can do something else up front. So this is where your cost goes up from $20 to $30 to $40, for maintaining your accounts. And in the insurance systems as well, if you can do an illustration, this is an example I wanted to give, that if you can do an illustration, which is your quote, you can essentially do new business. The only difference between an illustration or a quote and new business is underwriting part. But we do illustration upfront in a system that we spend 100 million yen, then we do new business again, and then do underwriting. So you can replace the entire new business part of your legacy system with the illustration system, and then just leave the underwriting part in the legacy. So you have eliminated, one big chunk of that old system. So, and there are several examples you can do.
Thank you, Roger. If anybody has a question, please use the Q&A box or the chat. Will, I wanted to come back to your comment earlier on, Jason had to hook into that. where you said that often you see business partners or suppliers driving change, especially if there may be international suppliers. And the question was, can you give a few more examples for that?
Yeah, the example that we use in the book and that I'm particularly familiar with is Hilltop Corporation. And I put the, here we go, I'll put the URL into the chat. This is a company with a history of learning and a philosophy of taking on new projects and new challenges. And we write about this in the book, so this is one of the chapters. And this particular company was initially what was a precision manufacturing company, and now it is a prototyping company that specializes in 3D physical shapes, especially cut out of aluminum. So it has transformed bit by bit over the years, over the decades even, to a knowledge-based company and to one that is preparing to transform itself another step into a platform company that will do not that will not focus on the physical object, but which will, as a platform, be brokering and matching up projects to companies. And this is a cultural transformation. So I would like to pick up on what Raja said, that we, if we say digital all the time, that sounds cool, but buzzwords are also distracting. This is about deep cultural change in businesses, and it's about operations management. So what is happening in the nuts and bolts of how the company operates? So that ties back to Raja's last couple of sentences about what's going on with the transaction and what's going on in the back end. This is operations management. It's what is coming down the pike. And if you're not doing it, it's either because you are operating a very safe cash cow kind of operation, or because you're asleep at the wheel. So even a steady money-making cash cow, we should be improving to improve its quality, its reliability, its stability, its profitability. So even there, you shouldn't be asleep just because it's a conventional, successful, normal company.
Excellent, thank you. I mean, if I may add, the cases I've seen is especially in the cybersecurity space, if you have Japanese companies with international subsidiaries or acquisitions, and they need to kind of satisfy certain standards abroad. Sometimes the head office recognizes that they're a bit behind here in Japan, and that might accelerate some of the fortifying of the defenses, for example. So I don't know if there's Jason typed something. I don't know if there was another question in that. I don't know. Seems like we're clearly run a bit over time, which was fully expected. We're without boundaries, which is kind of nice. But if there are no further questions, we can ask each other questions. It'll be fun. I can always ask more questions, but we're getting close to 2 hours. So I think I'll leave it at thanking Kieran, Roger, and Will for making the time to share the knowledge and do kind of a little redo of the conference at Kyoto University Graduate School of Business that happened earlier in the year. And obviously, if you're interested in hearing more, learning more, I think all gentlemen are available to connect on LinkedIn. The book has many more examples, and clearly, as Will said, also that field is developing, and we see what the next 18 months bring in Japan, and then maybe there's a second edition coming then as well. That would be fun. Clearly a space to watch out. It's one of these things where it seems Japan is at the turning point, and right, like many parts of the world. And if you could predict the future, we probably all wouldn't be here. We'd be having an umbrella drink somewhere at the beach. But 18 months from now, we can review this whole thing and see what we've accomplished in the interim. It will be, there's certainly not enough opportunity, right? I think everybody globally is licking their fingers a bit at the digital transformation agenda. And even if we're abusing the word digital, less we abusing the word agile at times, still there's some substantial change that could happen if the right levers are pulled. That makes it an exciting place for all of us to be, I think. So I think we can't clap. You can all clap virtually once for Kieran, Roger, and Will again. Thank you very much. It was good fun. I enjoyed it, and we'll make this content available in different forms for everybody who might have missed it. So thanks everybody for joining. If you want to join us again, next session is on Tuesday. Kind of similar topic, focused more on the Japanese management style and system. So hope to see you again.
Right. Thank you very much,
Thank
Norbert.
you.
Thanks
Thank you,
for
Norbert.
organizing.
Very good.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you to the listeners and your comments and questions.
Indeed, yeah.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks everybody for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.